So we have the resurrection of the Daleks, which they weren't dead, so they didn't really need to. But, well, this is an episode that's interesting and has some really great points, but it also has a lot of flaws in it. And most of it is just in presentation and delivery. But one of the high points of it is his resurrection, meaning they need to change from where they are. So it's basically the same plot from Destiny of the Daleks, which is the last time we've seen them. And this, it pretty much continues on. Continuity-wise, it's very good. This is continuing on with what happened at the end of that, where you had this war the Daleks were fighting with the Movellans. And they had reached an impasse because they were both machine-oriented and logic-based. Even though the Daleks are similar to the Cybermen, they're organic on the inside, and they run around in those machines. The Movellans were still a bit mysterious. I'm not entirely certain what their makeup is, since we never saw them again in at least in television. So I can't speak to novels and that sort of thing or Big Finish, but as far as TV shows go, never saw them again, and it appeared they were all just androids. And so that there's plenty of those around, so I don't know why they were any special, but apparently they fought the Daleks to a standstill, and the Daleks decided, well, we're at a loss for what to do next, so they went looking for Davros to try to help them. So that was the plot there. And of course, it ended, and Davros was cryogenically frozen and sent off to some space jail, I guess, for crimes against all life, whatever. And that's where he was left. Well, here we are, where we find out at the end of Frontios why the TARDIS was in trouble. It's because it was getting sucked into a time corridor that was created by the Daleks, because they were jumping through time to, I guess, because it was safer for them to be dealing with Earth. So there was this old abandoned warehouse, and the time corridor was there, and then they had a bunch of escapees escape amongst all that. And that was the mystery, and the Doctor had to figure out, hey, what's this time corridor? But it was utilizing Earth, and there were these police officers who were not real police officers, but were agents of the Daleks, and there was a bunch of agents of the Daleks, and that's one of the mistakes here is, so you knew that they were working for the Daleks. They wore these helmets that looked like, Dalek bodies on their head with the little poles. It was a little too stupid. I could have just said they're agents of the Daleks. I don't know that they would bother with those, since they don't really serve any purpose other than to look like a stupid helmet. But anyway, that was the deal. We later would learn that a lot of these people were duplicates, they called them. So I don't know if these were androids or they were clones of the originals. But that was the deal. And we're introduced to a character who's putting on like he's quite the coward and scared of everything. But no, he was sort of a sleeper agent within the escapees. And I guess his mission was to deal with that, but he didn't really do that. And then he comes upon the Doctor. So perhaps it's the Daleks were after the TARDIS and wanted it to get sucked into that. I'm not entirely certain. But it's just happenstance that things go the way they go, where the Doctor ends up with this guy. Of course, they get separated in investigating all this. Turlough ends up stumbling into the corridor and ends up on the space station that's connected to it, and Dalek ship is showing up. There's this other crew, and I'm forgetting, they were the ones transporting Davros, so the Daleks intercept that. And there's a battle and everything. So they want Davros again, because it turns out they lost the war with the Movellans, and that's one of the more interesting aspects of this. You don't get to see it depicted or anything, couldn't afford to do that, but they lost, and ultimately says, well, how did the Movellans finally tip the edge or whatever? they developed a virus for the Daleks. So perhaps they were just androids, it wouldn't affect them. But it was, of course, it was developed to attack the DNA of Daleks, so it did. And so what's left of the Daleks are now like, well, we better get Davros back, get back to our original plan, and try to figure this out. So, of course, they wanted him to develop, a vaccine, if you will, to fight off the virus and then retake the war with the Movellans and defeat them and all that. And so basically they're still needing him for that, but they don't trust him and he doesn't trust them, and so it begins to fall apart almost immediately, and they say he's too big of a threat, and they end up wanting to kill him anyway. But they still wouldn't have the cure. But meanwhile, it turns out Davros has a mind control injection or whatever device, if you will, inside his little chair there, which slipped his mind the previous times he'd been around. Should have been using that all along. They say that he was conscious while he was frozen through the whole time, and apparently it was a couple of decades he's been sitting there. But he couldn't move or nothing. So it's not unless through his brainwave pattern he was getting his chair to create something through it. You just got to make this stuff up for it. So he has the device. He can take over people and it can take over Daleks, which he does. And that's the split between them and the ones loyal to the Supreme Dalek and all that. Eventually, there is a confrontation between him and the Doctor. And the interesting thing here is, even before he gets to Davros, the Doctor is just, he's just using guns all over the place. And then finally, when he's got to deal with Davros, he brings in a Dalek gun, is going to shoot him in the face. But he just can't bring himself to do it, and so it's an okay confrontation between the two of them, and Davros is talking about strength and power and all that, and Doctor is talking about compassion, and Davros is trying to buy time. He says, well, hey, I'm going to fix the Daleks. I'm going to change how they are. And you can't believe a word he says. But even in this, the Doctor was running. I had a chance to wipe out the Daleks forever, and I didn't take it. So it's indicating that he has some regret about what happened in Genesis of Daleks. But he still, the idea of just flat out murder, he just can't do. And the others, he's using a gun, but it's in defense and that sort of thing. Later on, though, forget about guns. How about some bio-warfare? So he gets a canister of the virus and exposes the Daleks to it, and they just start, frothing at the seams all over the place. And that's it for them. Meanwhile, the Supreme Dalek contacts the Doctor and tells him that he has duplicates positioned in places of power throughout the Earth, and they will ultimately be victorious. Nothing becomes of this. The Doctor says, I guess I ought to inform the authorities of this. So I guess in between episodes he did. I don't know. He could contact UNIT and tell them what's happened. He does run into some British soldiers here, and I thought they would have made mention of his UNIT connections and stuff, because this could be a perfect case for UNIT. But they don't do anything like that, which I don't know why. So, and of course, the sleeper agent was a duplicate as well, but ultimately he ends up siding with the Doctor and sacrificing himself and destroying the Dalek ship and all that sort of stuff, and ending the time corridor. The Doctor is they intended to duplicate him, and they showed that they had already duplicated at least the bodies anyway of Tegan and Turlough, which. So I'm like, okay, are these androids? But because how would they get the sample? I don't know. But it leaves it kind of open, because they began to download all the Doctor's knowledge is what they wanted. And so it's one of these scenes where you can see the Doctor's past selves and stuff on the screen, and they do that. But they're getting down here to the very beginning before the sleeper agent guy turns and decides to free the Doctor. So I think they got enough there on record. I guess it's been destroyed with the ship's destruction, or unless they uploaded it to their main computers or what. They've got enough to make another Doctor if they want to. Could revisit some of that. And then, of course, the Dalek sleeper agents. I don't know. I can't recall if they did revisit that. But anyway. There's aspects of it that are good. There's others that aren't. And, of course, a lot of it is just you don't have the money to shoot scenes that would have expanded it more. But also, even though they were in close quarters and stuff, you got to learn how to do shootouts better than that. Some of these scenes of the shootouts between them are terrible. And I don't just mean because they didn't have the special effects. I mean, it just, they'll point their guns and it's like the guy's waiting to react to being shot and stuff. It's wasn't choreographed well. So the virus ends up being a means by which Davros also intends to use it so that he can I'm just going to go back to the drawing board and start over. So he's going to wipe out all the Daleks. But then, lo and behold, oh no, he starts frothing at the seams as well. It's hard not to laugh. He's like, but I'm not a Dalek, but yeah, you are. You based all of them on Khaled DNA, so it stands to reason that the virus would affect you, dummy. So, but maybe not as bad that he just, he's gonna have a rough time of it, but he'll recover, and we know he does. So, oh well. But another thing is that this was Tegan's final episode. Of course, character returns in Big Finish and stuff like that, but for all intents and purposes, this was it. And it's funny, I hadn't seen it in a while, and I remembered, oh yeah, because the whole story was so horrific that it was enough to drive her away. Well, yeah, it is, but I just don't think it was delivered in the fashion it needed. It's just all of a sudden, it's like, I'm not going, and she's running away, and the Doctor, well, not like this, and she's like, I gotta go. And he's like, oh, well, let's leave. So him and Turtle get in the TARDIS and take off. And she comes running back like, oh, well, maybe not. Too late. But sure, the episode provides a lot of horror for her character to be in a state of mind to leave. And there's enough elements there because she is in her timeline. It's 1984. She's on Earth. This might be our only chance to get back home before she's dead. So it's understandable to a certain extent. I just don't think the delivery was put together in a means for what it deserved. Because Tegan was a character who was a companion completely out of circumstance. She didn't want to be, but she was forced into this. And then later on, she didn't have much else to do. She had developed relationships with these people and wanted to stick around and with the Doctor and all that, so she does. But this is the closest she's gotten to get back home since the last time was basically being left behind by the Doctor. So I guess, yeah, and she did, she saw this woman who was helping her out got murdered in front of her in this Dalek episode and all that. But the delivery just wasn't right where it needed to be, I don't think, and that's unfortunate. But, so it's a flawed episode. It's got problems for it, but it also has some very interesting aspects to it. Certainly elements that I thought should have been explored further later and just weren't. The Movellans were, for one, and stuff like that. But, just didn't. Also, Davros is like, this is the Doctor, like he doesn't recognize him and all that, but it probably should have a little bit more of that because this Davros knows about space travel and everything. Now, granted, he did get information from the Fourth Doctor in Genesis of the Daleks, and I'm sure he still knows all this stuff. All the tapes and stuff were gone, but he was there listening to it. So maybe that's what it is, that he knows all this, because as far as the Khaleds were concerned, there was no such thing as space travel and aliens. That it just could have been Davros lying to them and stuff. But boy, he just jumps like a fish to water to space travel and space wars and all this stuff. I guess he's just that smart, and he catches up and all that. But anyway, so there we go. Resurrection of the Daleks, who were not dead, so they didn't really need the resurrection. They just needed to do some changes, which they didn't get to. But I guess they'll figure out the virus later. But anyway, there you go. Resurrection of the Daleks. Thanks for watching and listening. Say, while you're still here, why not like and subscribe and share with your many friends? Yes. Also, check out my mini stores in the link description below. Yes, where you can get t-shirts, hats, mugs, all those goodies with my artwork on them. Oh, yeah. And head over to indieplanet.com and pick up a copy of my comic book, Night Night. Oh, yeah. You can also catch me at my podcast, Mr Nailsin Show, on RadioMisfits.com. And you can also watch my videos on BitChute.com and now on Rumble.com. Oh, my goodness. So many places to watch me and my stuff. Oh, yeah. And if that's not enough for you, well, you can follow me on many social media platforms and say hi to your old pal, Mr. Nailsin.